Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us at our 13th Salem Lit Fest. I'm Stephanie Buck, a member of the team of Salem Athenaeum staff and volunteers who bring you this festival each year. I'm very pleased to introduce this session, It's Complicated, Animals and Humans. Before I introduce our authors, I want to give you a quick overview of how this will work. We've pasted our anti-harassment policy at the top of the chat so you know the rules up front. We don't anticipate any problems from you, but we also want you to know how important it is to us that everyone feels safe. Most of you are Zoom experts by now, so just a few quick tips. Please put your questions in the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them after our authors have finished their conversation. Any other comments can be put in the chat, though we'd appreciate you keeping it to a minimum because it can distract our authors. If you'd like to use closed captioning, just click on the box that says CC at the bottom of your screen. And now our guests. Kira Jane Buxton's debut novel, Hollow Kingdom, was a finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor, the Audie Awards, and the Washington State Book Awards, and was named the best book of 2019 by NPR, Book Riot, and Good Housekeeping. She spends her time with 3 cats, a dog, 2 crows, a charm of hummingbirds, 5 Steller's jays, 2 dark-eyed juncos, and a husband. Nick McDonnell is author of 4 novels, most recently The Council of Animals. His nonfiction works include The Civilization of Perpetual Movement, Nomads in the Modern World, The End of Major Combat Operations, and The Bodies in Person, an account of civilian casualties in American wars. Linda Rutledge, a lifelong animal lover, has had the joy of petting baby rhinos, snorkeling with endangered turtles, and strolling with a tower of giraffes in her eclectic freelance writing career for well-known publications and organizations while winning awards and residencies for her fiction. Her debut novel, Faith Bath's Darling's Last Garage Sale, won the 2013 Writers League of Texas Book Award for Fiction and was adapted into a major 2019 French film starring Catherine Deneuve. She, her husband, and resident dog live outside Austin, Texas. And last but very much not least, moderator S. Kirk Walsh is the author of the national bestseller, The Elephant of Belfast. She is at work on a second novel about Detroit during World War II. Her reviews and essays have been published in the New York Times Book Review, Catapult, Virginia Quarterly Review, and others. She also lives in Austin, Texas. And with that, I'll leave it to you to take it away.
Thank you, Stephanie. Welcome, everyone. Really happy to be back at the Salem Lit Festival to speak with our authors today about animals, mostly and humans, and how they're depicted in each of their wonderful novels. And I'm just going to launch into some questions. And as Stephanie said, definitely encourage questions from the audience. If you put them in the Q&A in the bottom navigation, I will get to them towards the end. And so, I thought I'd start with Kira, and this question is posed to all the authors, to Linda and Nick as well, just to tell readers about the origins of this novel. And obviously, Kira, this is a sequel to your very successful debut, Hollow Kingdom. If you want to get us started in terms of how did you kind of arrive at this very particular set of characters?
This very weird set of characters. Thank you for that. Yes, Feral Creatures is the sequel. Hollow Kingdom is the first book, and it is narrated by a crow. So it's, it's kind of different in that respect, and then it really is from the voice of animals, not just a crow, but there's sort of these interstitial chapters as well from other animals. I've always been a crazy animal nut. I grew up in a bunch of places, Jakarta and Dubai and a bunch of places, and everywhere I was really lucky to have pretty close animal encounters. My first job, I was a volunteer at a zoo when I was 12 because I was precocious and my mom needed me to, be out of the house. And I went through that crazy horse stage that the sort of rite of passage that girls go through at like 12. I was obsessed, and I used to sort of pretend my family's luggage was a horse. I was so, and so always loved animals, and then moved to Seattle about 12 years ago. And I suddenly was around so many crows. I'd never really had this experience before, being around so many. And I had this experience where I was walking my dog, and we found an injured crow with its wing like in a really terrible place backwards. And in the trees were about 60 crows who were all, screaming for their relative. And I approached, and I thought, well, I've got to do something to help, but assumed I would get dive bombed, sort of Tippi Hedren style. And instead, when I approached, this little crow seemed to recognize I was there to help, and all the crows, the family went silent. And I ushered it into a little box, took it off to the wildlife rehab place, and very sadly, the crow didn't survive. But ultimately, what happened then was, when I was walking around the neighborhood, the crows were following me, and I started having these close crow encounters, and ended up befriending 2 crows who. Really, I would say it's not hyperbolic to say that they changed my life. At the time, I was going through terrible rejection with a novel, and I was, I'd worked on it for 2 years, going back and forth with this dream agent. It didn't pan out. And I fell into this funk. I was really it was the sort of dark night of the soul stuff. And I say about this time that I was famously drinking wine out of a salad bowl and rolling around the place, feeling sorry for myself. And my husband said, go write about the crows. You love them. You're having these experiences. And I was driving one day and thought, oh, what if I write from the perspective of a crow? And what if I'm writing about a crow who is talking about the extinction of humanity? And so that is a very long-winded way of saying how this book came about. Yeah.
And Nick, what about you? I mean, this book is so different from your previous books, and you're also writing from the perspective of animals.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, my book came about in a similar way. I had a kind of dark night of the soul also. I had been reporting on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan for some time, and I had finished a book about them. And then I was also thinking about what a rotten bunch of monkeys we are, us Homo sapiens. And I thought, well, what do I really like thinking about? And at the time, I was trying to learn how to speak Spanish, and my vocabulary was very simple. It was el gato, el ratón, this kind of stuff. And I was studying the grammar of sort of simple animal sentences. And I thought, what would the animals think of us rotten monkeys? And are we really worth anything, or are we not? Let's leave it to the rest of them to think about. And there's a crow actually in this book, and he's, I think, my favorite of the characters in this book. So I'm real partial to crows too.
And Linda, how did you land on a road trip with giraffes in 1938?
Well, I was in the middle of a that started in 1999. Actually, I was doing a book project for the San Diego Zoo, and fell into that, and that was pretty wonderful. But I was in their archives, and I was looking at these. You got to picture this. The scrapbooks are falling apart, and they've been made. They were put together by volunteers, like in 1930, right? And I was going through those just for this other part. I was writing about the director. I was writing a nonfiction book about the director of bio in the 50s and 60s who revolutionized zoos. And pretty much every zoo that you go to now, it has no bars or anything because of this guy. However, back it up. Here I am with these scrapbooks, and I found myself reading about, really old ones. They just fascinated me. And I think they must have started like right after the zoo was started, about in the 20s. And so but by the 30s, they had really started, they had bought or applied for a news clipping service. And that was a thing that happened back then, Now nobody does that, but the news clipping service would go through and cut and send them anything was about the zoo. So I got spent hours with this stuff. But what really stopped me in cold was this story about, I bet you 30 clippings about how they got their first giraffes.
Mhm.
And I wasn't a novelist yet. I was a nonfiction writer. And, you know, I was already talk about dark night of the soul. I mean, I think being an author or being a novelist is certainly, it's going to have that, you know, right? So anyway, we know that now. But in essence, I had tried and failed and tried and failed. And, you know, I decided that obviously now the novels, which is what I wanted to write, really wasn't going to happen. So I went into creative nonfiction, and you know, I was already doing nonfiction. So I didn't know what to do with this. I couldn't write it. It was only 30. I didn't have enough. It would tell me, I even had things like I had a telegram. These, if you've read the novel, you'll know that the newspaper clippings are in it, and they're only changed just a tiny bit, just for literary purposes. They are the clippings. I made them work, you know, across country. And I knew, though, that there were big old holes. And one of the things that I had in my hand was an actual telegram that Belle Benchley, who was the only first female zoo director of the world, she was a big deal back then. And she had actually put in for Lloyd's of London to insure the giraffes across country. And I had that telegram. And of course, it had mentioned, it kind of gave me an idea for what could happen, you know, fill in those blanks, because it mentioned tornadoes, it mentioned dust storms, it mentioned flats, you know. So in essence, I started just thinking, well, okay, I really can't do this yet, but you know, there this is, and I'm going to make copies of all of these just in case, who knows. So fast forward, in 2012, I get called from them that says, and they're wanting me to finish writing, taking that chunk that I had done and finish writing a massive 2-volume, you know, 4-color thing for the centennial of the zoo. So that was going to be 2016. And I said, I couldn't say yes fast enough, of course. And in essence, by that time, I had become a novelist. I had ultimately, crazy happenings, I actually had my first novel published, and that was in 2012. So at this point, I revisited the giraffes story. I had to tell it again for what we had of it, for the history, the centennial history. And in doing so, I work all day on that, and to play, you know, writers are crazy. What we do, as these guys all know, I would work on this project, which for money, right? And then I would play by writing more. I was writing for nothing, you know, just because it was play. And so I'm, you know, doing both all the time. And my play was, I started designing a whiteboard. And in essence, I decided what could be done, how I could handle, how I could fit in all those things. So all that to say, essentially, one of the things that also was happening at the same time was I became very aware, being around the zoo, was the 6th extinction that was happening. And we aren't talking about that much now, and we should be talking about it a lot. I think it's a little bit more into the culture, but at the time it was not. And I felt like it needed to be in the context of that. So I figured out a way, you know, with the frame story, figured out a way to tell that old story in a few years in the future when giraffes were extinct.
Thanks. All right, well, I have a few other questions. And I think, yeah, just for myself, you know, the process of animating animals. I mean, I think with Kira and Nick, you all are in the perspective and the voice of the characters. But how did you go? I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges of fiction is creating complex, layered characters. And was this something that happened in the revision process? You know, just how did you kind of work on developing your characters as animals? And Kara, do you want to get us
Yeah.
Try it again.
Gosh, with pleasure. I had so much. There's a lot of room for me to play because there's so many different animal characters, and I'd say that coming at it, it was it was a conflation of my nerdiness and excitement at reading as much nonfiction about the natural world as I possibly could, and storing away these little facts, and then also having a long history of being around animals and being close to animals. And when I worked at the zoo, I did things like I hand fed the Sumatran rhino, and I brushed the tongue of the hippo. And so I've been very close to a lot of these animals. And I think if you've had that experience, if you've been so lucky to be close to an animal, whether it's your poodle or a giraffe, you know innately that there's a lot going on. They're very complex. And I have found that they have individual personalities. And so the complication is sometimes that people are not so, certainly the scientific community are not so open to anthropomorphism. One of my favorite descriptions of it came, I don't know if you've read Merlin Sheldrake's book, Entangled Life, which is about fungi. But he has this quote that he's sort of a little facetiously talking about the way anthropomorphism is received. And he says something like, anthropomorphism is usually perceived as a blister that arises in soft minds. So, which made me like fall off my chair laughing, because I do feel like there's a sort of aversion. When I was first sending out the novel to agents, one of them responded with, this sounds amazing, but I won't touch it because I'm allergic to animal narrators. So, there was sort of some hurdles to overcome in thinking about anthropomorphizing. But really, it came from a place of reverence. It came from a place of wanting to do justice in the face of climate change and the sixth extinction, in the, challenging the idea that every story has to be an anthropocentric narrative, and instead thinking about ways to show the lives of animals and have a reader feel connected to them, and therefore maybe have a reader feel connected to care more about them. That was really my goal, and that's how I went about it.
And Nick, what about you? I mean, I will say that I couldn't help but not, think about Animal Farm when I was reading your novel. And just how did you kind of develop your characters?
That's really high praise. Thank you. I thought about it a lot while I was writing the novel too. And I thought about them really as people. I was thinking these animals represent different ways that people approach decision making. And then I wrote them as though they were people. And then I added on to them pretty stereotypical animal vibes. So the cat is cooler than the dog. The dog is a little bit eager. And my hope was that by having these animals, even if they brought some of their animal stereotypeness into these characters, by having the animals forward, the kind of frame that was mentioned earlier might alert the reader to the idea that the safety of the natural world is at risk, in the sense that the sixth extinction is ongoing, and that frame might bracket the political discussions inside. And for the texturing of them, I thought about people. So I tried to make them as textured as we can be, which on some bases more textured than others. And that was how I went about it.
And Linda, what about you with your giraffe characters?
Well, I didn't quite do that. I stayed within, it is a first person telling of a story. So essentially I had to stay with the old, with Woody, Woody Nickel, the old man who's telling the story, writing the story down before he's, it's 105 years old before he goes. And so what I did was, it has to be through his view, and his view was, if and I say right up front in the first chapter, I believe, is that he was always told, growing up, that that no four-legged creature had a soul, and yet he knew from he had an animal sense about him. So essentially, his response was, he saw more soul in animals than he ever did with the humans that he knew, and that's what he said right up front before he'd even met the giraffes. And actually, I think it was right when he met the giraffes. And in essence, I also have another character, the old man, the keeper. Somewhere along the line, he actually does say, it makes a real point of saying how Woody definitely has, whether he likes it or not, he has an animal connection, and that that life is life, no matter who or what you are, a thing to respect. And if you don't know that, you're just a waste of skin. And in essence, I think that it becomes the reader is supposed to feel closer and closer and closer to the giraffes as they go on. And Woody's fighting it for reasons that you find out in the book, and he's fighting this feeling. And when it finally does come, it comes at a moment when the giraffes were in danger, and they had come to him for safety, or for the situation in fact. And that's supposed to be, a big moment because of that, because they've connected and he's allowed it to connect.
Yeah, I think, just in relationship to that, it's like we think we're saving the animals, but in fact, the animals kind of save us.
I say that several times,
Yeah,
maybe 5 or 6 times. I actually have in one place, I say that the old man tells the old keeper says, he says to Woody that they know the secret of life, and you got them in your back. You got them in your back seat, boy. You should be asking them, what it is. And then, of course, you come back to that later.
The one thing I was struck by at the beginning of Kara's novel, The Epigraph, by Carol Eschwaller, the writer, and I'm just going to read it because I felt like it sort of is a theme that speaks to each of the novels. Maybe it's animalness that will make the world right again, the wisdom of elephants, the enthusiasm of canines, the grace of snakes, the mildness of anteaters. Perhaps being human needs some diluting. And yeah, I guess, Kara, how you came to that epigraph for your book. I know all of us, it's like quite a decision-making process, but also how, just animals kind of make the world right.
Yeah, it's such a gorgeous quote, and I'm a fan of hers anyway. And I found that quote and thought, wow, that's very much a distillation of sort of the backbone of biophilia of my novel. This idea that our instinct is to love nature. And I think in writing from the perspective of these animals, I very callously wipe out the entire human race in my novels. So there's the whole point is that there's a view of the future that is entirely from the perspective of animals. And through that lens, I'm able to explore kind of what our legacy would be, and what certain animals would take from us, would remember of us, from the pets, the domestics, to, the wild animals that were very much persecuted by us. But I'm just interested, I think it's interesting that the connection with all of our stories is that we are trying to instill a sense of sort of environmental consciousness in the reader. And I think to that end, having these characters that I don't know if you can hear that. My crow is outside yelling at me to come outside. Speak of the devil. And there goes a siren. So yeah, I think the whole idea is to remember to engage with the environment and to remember that, we tend to think of ourselves as a higher intelligence, and we measure intelligence to our strengths. But really, there's this whole natural world happening around us. And certainly the hope with my novel is that even starting to notice the trees in your backyard, starting to be able to name them, to get a tree literacy, to start to recognize that the birds that are in your backyard are the same birds every day. They're coming back. They live, that you share space with them. And I feel like that's, there's just this wonderful invitation at all times to reconnect with what we are, what is really our birthright, what we're a part of. So yeah, that's kind of why I thought that quote was such a beautiful, sort of the essence of what my books stand for sure.
And do you think, I was just thinking like backyard birding kind of became a little more popular during the pandemic because we couldn't go anywhere.
And wasn't
I
that,
wonder if,
wasn't that such a refresh for people who are already birding? It was such a wonderful sort of expansion of, a way we could all connect, a way that, we're reintroducing ourselves to our environment. And it's learning a new language. It's remembering a language. It's a very special thing. It's humbling. You get to kind of leave the world of human woes behind and, remember that we live on this glorious planet, and the best thing about it is its biodiversity.
Yeah, Helen McDonald, also another wonderful animal bird writer, talked about being able to like identify the sparrows in her backyard. I can say I did not get to that level, but yeah. And Nick, what about you? What do you think humans can learn from the animals, and kind of element of humans becoming extinct?
Well, one thing I have learned myself is not to leave the back door open when the raccoons are in the backyard. Came inside, I was out there eating a pizza with some friends, and these two raccoons appeared, and the friends and I were looking. We said, "That's a bold raccoon. Do you think we have to close the door?" And as we said it, the second raccoon came into the house.
Wow.
Commenced the Three Stooges routine with brooms, and eventually lure the thing out.
That's the best.
And he or she left. That raccoon left. But biophilia, I can think of nothing higher or better than biophilia, even for that gnarly raccoon that came into my house and wrecked my bathroom and kitchen. And that is the basis of all the work, and even is at the basis of all the good fiction. And also that epigraph made me think about how we ourselves are animals, and I kept thinking about that the whole time. So it's optimistic quote in that sense, I think, because maybe
we forget, don't we? We forget that we're not, it's not us and them, it's not nature and us. We've separated ourselves in many ways, but this is who we are. We are natural animals, we are. I'm also wondering what that raccoon's stories are now. Busting into your house. That's so great.
There are a few of them. There are 3, I think, raccoons that live in this lot next door, and they have seen a lot. And there are very feelings about them in the neighborhoods. There's a lot of raccoon love, but there's also some raccoon.
I was staying at my sister's. She lives outside of Ann Arbor, and a raccoon came through the cat door, and I was sleeping in the bedroom on the ground floor, and I had to slam the door shut so the raccoon wouldn't come into my bedroom. I was a little nervous.
It's the raccoon uprising, the raccoon revolution.
Well, it could be worse, raccoons, it's all encroachment, raccoons were there before you were, and for all of us, right? But I had a moment, must tell you about. I had a moment, I live outside of Austin and in the woods, and one morning my dog was going nuts, and I went out to the front and noticed that looked like there was a kitten over to the left and behind some stuff I had outside on the front porch. Got a little closer, a little closer. It was a baby fox. Oh. And, I'm wondering who her mom is. and as it turned out, it wasn't just one. There was 2 or 3 of them. They were all just hanging out over here in the corner, and I think my dog had raced them around. I don't know. Point is, it was a moment where you just thought, okay, this is a little too close, but in essence, it happens around here a lot, and that kind of thing. But we have to get, I have fawns that are born right there, outside my window almost. And so, but the thing is, I'm so used to it now that I relish it in an odd, strange way. I don't really want the baby foxes there, because I don't know where mom is and how she'll feel about it. But it does remind me daily, that I'm part of an ecosystem, and it's all together. We are all together. I even wrote this in the author's note in the book. It's just, bees and butterflies. If we lose them, we're going to lose. We already know this about bees now, of course, that if we lose them, we're going to lose food. We're going to lose a lot of things. But we're more educated about it, but not as much. And that's been better than storytelling to really get over the points well. If we like our stories, we when it's done well, it stays.
It matters. It matters. The stories that we ascribe to a creature matter, because through human reverence, we can afford them protection.
Yeah.
I think about this book, The Tiger by John Valen, and he says an interesting thing. He said that, when the tiger was seen as at one point, it was seen as vermin. And so, of course, everybody was, shooting them. And then the stories we told about them changed, and they became trophies. So again, we're shooting them, but the story's changing. And then, and then suddenly, if the story that humans give to the tiger is that it's a national treasure, it's an international treasure, it's an icon, it's a beautiful beast. Well, that changes how humans view this animal and how it's treated. And so I think storytelling is so essential when it comes to protecting the natural world,
Yeah, and it certainly seems like the stakes keep increasing, just given our ongoing climate problems. And I guess, if there's anything else you want to add about, did you feel a sense of urgency given our environment right now?
Well, sure. Yeah. So there's and I mentioned this in the author's note too, that one of the things that inspired me was a TED talk that I read about the time I was writing it, and a man named John Mullallam, who writes he's a nature writer and a lot of other things, but his TED talk said, the quote, I think if I can recall it exactly, it said, storytelling matters, that imagination has become an ecological force. And so the stories we tell, and how we tell them, and how often we tell them, they can change things. And I think this what's happening with extinctions. Tigers got precious when we were about to lose them, and we're about to lose them. And they're on the level with the giraffes and rhinos and elephants. Rhinos are a lot worse, but in essence, they become precious to us when we start realizing that, and we can do something about it. And that's the whole idea, right?
Yeah,
we can do something about it.
There's still hope. We still have time to make changes. And yeah, I think that was also something that was I was conscious of, was that I realized that I was experiencing a lot of sort of ecological anxiety and climate existentialism, I'd go as far to say. But I also recognized that I wasn't motivated by doom and gloom. The statistics are terrifying and tended to terrify me to the point of shutting me down. But I realized that the things that did motivate me were hope and humor. And I'm first and foremost a humor writer. So that was the impetus of trying to infuse humor and hope into the book, because I felt like, I can sneakily disguise this eco story as a quest from a crow, with a swearing crow. It doesn't I don't know, it's not everybody gets the message, but I think that the way we tell the stories and the way we frame it and the hope that we can provide a reader can make a difference. One hopes, right? One hopes. That's why we do it. Yeah.
And what about you, Nick? Did you feel a sense of urgency while you were writing this, or just given our current ever-changing situation?
Well, I'm just engaged in this war with these raccoons, and it's really a problem for me. So I'm just constantly thinking, what am I going to do? The urgency outside of my backyard is a real thing, and I feel it sometimes, but I don't think about it that much when I'm writing the book, because I find it to be such a massive question, climate change, that this book was not dealing with that massive problem. So I try to think when I'm writing about what exactly I'm trying to do. And Orwell, who wrote Animal Farm, had this great essay, famous one, about why I write. And he said that people write for 4 reasons. They write for political purpose, to mark the historical record, for aesthetic satisfaction, and out of egomania. And he said that one can see in a writer over the course of a career how these 4 things will ebb and flow in a person's life. And so I think about those, and I think about what I'm trying to accomplish in each of them. I think it's a pretty good. I would add play. I think that you added Orwell's essay there that he missed. So I think that's a really good thing earlier. And so I think about those, and then sort of what I'm accomplishing in each of those lanes. But climate change writ large, I'm just freaked out about it generally, but I'm not dealing with it in the book that way.
Yeah. And when you're saying play, it made me think of a quote from George Sanders, and I'm not saying it word verbatim, but he'd say, when in doubt, have fun, like trying to find the fun in the language or the story and the humor, like you said, Kira. And there's one question from the audience, which would be directed to Nick and Kira, because it's crow related. Crows are said to be highly intelligent. How do they show their smarts?
Ooh, how long do we have? So right outside my window, I have a little flagpole, and my crows, they know where I am at any given time in the house. And they learned how to specifically call for me by projecting their voices and a specific call into the house. And they learned how to also alert my husband to come and get me by staring him down when he reverses his car out the driveway. They're very clever. I have loads of stories about how intelligent they are. The crow I became closest to, I called her T, and she inspired a lot of the antics and shenanigans of my protagonist in my book. And one of the things I tried to teach, I would, teaching, like little words I'd try to teach her, like come on up, I would say, to get her to hop up onto the step where I'm sitting. My dog, I taught the same, when I ask him to come up onto the couch or a step, come on up, same cue. It took my dog, weeks and weeks to learn this. It took T 2 iterations. She got it in 2 iterations. She learned that come on up, and she'd do it every time. She knew right away what I was saying. You don't have to spend a lot of time with them to understand how eerily intelligent they are. Really, just wow. It's incredible. They're the gift that keeps on giving. They're synanthropic, so there's so much to watch when you're watching crows. So much to learn. We're just beginning to scratch the surface of how intelligent they are. Yeah.
Would that make grackles smart too? That's what we have a lot of here in Texas.
You do have a lot of grackles, don't you?
Yeah. They congregate in the grocery store parking lots.
Have you had close encounters with the grackles? Like, have you? No?
Not really. Not really, no.
I wonder how synanthropic they are, whether they're more like some of the corvids don't really like to spend time with people. Like ravens are a little, more shy and wary of people, but the crows they'll get close. So that's the difference, they interesting. I wonder about grackles. I have no grackle experience.
And Nick, do you have anything else to add on the crow front?
No, I
No.
leave it to the crow expert, Giraffe.
So you
Yeah.
said you said you got into them. What was the, and you said that the crow was like your favorite to write. So what about crows captured you?
Well, the crow, I love the way that I love the noise they make.
Yeah.
And so this crow in this book makes a lot of noise all the time. And this crow in this book actually is not the smartest of the animals on the council, so maybe gives crows a bad name, but crows, like people, are various. And so this maybe is not the Einstein of crows. This crow is kind of a maniac.
There are those too. That checks out. Yep.
Well, just to remind the audience, if you have any other questions, you can put them in the little Q&A function down there at the bottom, but I still have more, so I'll keep asking them. And yeah, I guess, is there an author or novel? I mean, I kind of mentioned Animal Farm already with Nick, but if there's any other books that are in conversation you feel like with your own novel. Linda, do you want to get us started?
Well, I'm not the right one to start because I'm
Okay.
in the middle of another book, and I can't read anything else while I'm writing a new book, and or their voice gets in my head. Mm-hmm. So I went straight into this one with after West with Stress. So I really can't tell.
So you don't read at all? You have to like block out other voices?
Yeah. And I didn't know I did, but yes. If I did, I noticed, I stopped in between, there was a several months in there before West with Drafts came out. And I noticed that when I started reading, these other people, and I noticed this too when I was I started writing like them. It's just bizarre. And I noticed, when I was getting in, in my MA, it was a whole Faulkner semester. And I started writing these long ass sentences, and I didn't notice I was doing it. And these were like on the essay questions, and I thought, oh my gosh, I guess he's used to it though, the professor. But it was marked. I actually noticed it because I had it in my head. So I just can't. I can't. And since I moved back into this one so quickly after West with Giraffes, then I haven't read anything lately, and it's kind of a sad thing. I have, interestingly enough, I have a little pile waiting, maybe next January or something.
Well, in terms of books that my books in conversation with, I would say, so many nonfiction books, because really, my editor would tell you that one of the things she had to rein in was me just peppering in little animal facts here and there. And, there's only so much you can squeeze into a book, and not everyone needs to know how many teeth every character has. But I got really into that. But so a lot of nonfiction books, but I would say a really delightful thing is I often get compared to some really great humorists. So I would say there's a book by Douglas Adams, obviously his famous, Hitchhiker's Galaxy, but he wrote one called Last Chance to See, which is a really great book because it's he was so successful. He used his platform to write to visit various.
I have that book. Yeah.
Have you read that one? It's good.
Oh yeah, I have it.
Yeah, it's great. And so he visits these different places. He goes to see the Komodo dragons. He goes to see, puffins. He goes around the world, and in his, delightfully humorous way, talks about the fact that this might be the last chance to see these creatures, and it's an environmental book in his voice. So I would say that one. Very, I don't know if I'm allowed to compare my book to Douglas Adams, but I just did. So
you're definitely
Go
allowed.
right ahead.
Seems a bit much.
Well, that's what made him famous, though.
And what a great project for him to go and look at those that way. Just the best assignment.
Yes, I know. I try to imagine what it was like for him and what it was like, traveling with him, and he has some pretty like close calls and scary chopper rides and things like this. Must have been quite a trip. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I've only read The Hitchhiker's Guide, but I really love that book.
Yeah.
And is one of, there weren't a lot of talking animals in that book, though. Whether there were aliens,
Oh, well, you
were there
know,
animals? I can't remember.
dolphins.
Dolphins, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
big dolphins. But he's a big dolphin fan, obviously, thinking they were
Yeah.
more intelligent than we are.
Right. Well, my answer to the question is there's a whole bunch of talking animal books that I love, and I am not going to compare myself to them either. But I was thinking about Aesop's Fables. I was thinking about Animal Farm. I was thinking about Kipling's The Jungle Book and Watership Down, and the Redwall books by Brian Jock, which I loved as a kid. Yeah, those are the ones at the top of my mind.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great. And that fits really well. Those are great books.
Yeah, I think it's just, and there is a whole kind of genre of animal literature. I actually, when I was working on my book, the story I kept returning to was a short story by Edward P. Jones called The Girl Who Raised Pigeons. It's the first story in his collection, Lost in the City. But it, I think, like finding those moments of animating tenderness, you know, it can be animals and people, or animals and animals, but and I guess, yeah, if you want to talk a little bit more about process, and I just wondered like who your first reader is, and who kind of, and do you wait a while before you give a manuscript to someone? Or, I mean, I know some writers are part of writing groups where they might show something in process or read something in process.
My first reader is my husband. And with Hollow Kingdom and, you know, subsequently Feral Creatures and the next book, I finish a chapter and then I read it to him. And it's a real test of a marriage, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I don't think my marriage could handle that.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's it can get dicey.
Is he a writer himself, or
he's not
good listener?
He's a fantastic listener. He's well read, and he's also he's an artist. So he's also it works really well, and I'm extraordinarily lucky that I have that, and it does work, and I get to see, you know, what he's sort of projecting, what he's thinking, where we go next. So it works, and I don't know why, but you know, let's hope it continues to work for the sake of our marriage.
What about you, Linda? Who's your first reader?
Oh, it just depends, you know, depends on, it just depends. I'm not really sure. Y'all know this, you know, but I'm having a situation right now, for instance. Might as well tell you about it. I think that we don't really know. There's no quote that says you don't finish a novel, you abandon it. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's so true. And so I have a situation where right now I have a sister who wanted to read it because my next one is based on growing up in the 1960s. And so, you know, she did too. So in the same little town. So I, of course, used a lot of stuff. And so she said something. I thought it was going to be, you know, my first final draft be finished in August or so. Well, I thought it was. And then I said, okay, you really want to read it? It's good. I'll ask you some questions afterwards. You can be my first reader, and I'll ask you questions, and that, you know, give you the stress. No stress there. And then I changed the ending, and then I had to say, "Oh, hold up! You know, don't read that yet. Read this one." So it kept being bugging me. There were some logic problems to the, you know, and I thought about it 2-3 days, and I went, "Oh my gosh, I know what I can do." And I changed it again. And I do not have the courage to email her again and just say, stop. trying again, because essentially we don't really know. And I really don't think, I think it's, and today I thought of something else. In fact, you'll like this. It's something I'm going to put in that's going to be from the POV, point of view of a dog. And
I thought you were going to say a raccoon.
Oh yeah, close. No, it's maybe that's next, but no, they're all of them are human in here, lots of humans, but and the dog, and there's a very important dog in here, and I just realized, well, what the heck,
Do it.
And so I essentially am going to, I'm playing with that right now, whether I keep it or not, or whether the editor will let me keep it, But the point is, I guess I'm making a point about writing. And, Gertrude Stein, if y'all know who she is, back in Hemingway's day, she said this wonderful quote that I think I found it during my master's work. To write is 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 to write. And, it's like 13 of them, and it's true. You really do you have to abandon something. And even with West Giraffes, I noticed that I kept messing with it, while she was sending it out. Now, y'all may not be like that, but that's me. So first readers probably shouldn't do that because they're going to change it.
What about you, Nick? Do you have kind of a trusted reader, or does it change from manuscript to manuscript, given that you kind of write in different genres?
About a half a dozen people who read first versions of different stuff I do, depending on the work. Fiction to some people, nonfiction to others.
Yeah.
Is that people through a writing group, or is that friends, or how did you find your beta readers?
Well, one of them had the bad luck to be born my little brother, and he gets everything. And then the rest of them, for the nonfiction, are journalist friends who I've worked with or lived
I bet.
different
It's
times.
a lot.
So, and they're often experts on the things that I'm writing about in a way that I'm not. So there's both the writingness of it, but there's the material too, which is great. And then the rest are a combination of friends and my girlfriend and all old professors and things like that.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, Stephanie's back. Should I ask one more question, or should we wrap up? What would you like?
We can do one more quick question.
Gosh, which one should I pick? I guess, what book are you recommending to friends right now? Or is there, I know Linda's not quite reading right now, but I guess a favorite book that you kind of press on others, given the opportunity.
I just recently read Lulu Miller's Why Fish Don't Exist, and I love that very deeply. And if I try to explain it, I will bungle it. So I just recommend it very highly. It's fantastic.
Great, thank you. Nick, is there something that you've been recommending?
Yeah, I'm looking at a shelf of books right now, and I'm trying to think what it should be. This is such a
Tough, isn't it?
high pressure question, this one. I'm reading right now two things, so I'm going to cheat and give you two answers.
Okay.
Is this book called What We Owe the Future, which is by this philosopher at Oxford who has an idea about the moral responsibility we have to people who are not yet born. And so that is kind of heavy, but he does it with a light touch. And the lighter one that I really loved over the last few years was Mr. Fox by Helen Oyeyemi. And I push that on people too sometimes.
Yeah. Linda, is there a book from when you were reading in between books? Or any book that
look, it's funny. I have actually, that's only about half of them, but I have already downsized once, and as you might imagine, that was really tough getting rid of books. But I had to choose the ones that I was going to, that were important to me. I can't there's just so many. It's funny how often this is asked, and over the years I've been asked this a lot, and it's torturous, unless something just pops in my head. It's just absolutely torture to try. If I start answering, it'd be kind of like what I was telling you about writing. It's essentially, I would say, well, how about this one? Then I go, no, let's see, and this one, and this one, and this one. I try not to, if I could possibly do it, just because I can go on and on. If we have about an hour, I could make a list,
Okay.
You know what?
Excellent.
I'll actually jump in with one more because I was thinking,
Okay.
and it's coming out next week, and a friend of mine wrote it, and it's really incredible book. It's called The Storm Is Here by Luke Mogelson. And I think it may be the greatest piece of journalism of the last, one of the great pieces that I have known ever in my lifetime written.
Wow, that's high praise.
And
Really just about as good as it gets. It's up close, observational, in the moment, what he saw. And he was a war correspondent who I met originally in Afghanistan, covered Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and then he came back to the United States in 2020 and covered sort of the pandemic, the protests around George Floyd, all the way up until January 6th. And then he was actually in the Capitol building with those people. So all that you saw, he was the guy shooting that.
wow.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's amazing.
I think I've read about this book. I've also read about
I
this.
think actually we got to wrap up. Yeah, sorry.
This is such a great conversation, and I hate to stop all of you, but we do have another panel starting at 4. So I'm going to say thank you very much, Kira, Nick, Linda, and Kirk. It was wonderful to have you here. Up next, we have The Forest for the Trees, Climate Change in Fiction, which is at 4 o'clock Eastern. Thank you to the Salem Athenaeum and all of our sponsors, and also a final big thanks to our audience. If you are so inclined, you can purchase our authors' books at our sponsored bookstore, Wicked Good Books, here in Salem. You can find them at Copper Dog Books in Beverly or from your local favorite bookseller. Our festival is free for everyone every year and is possible due to your support. So please, if you'd like to donate, please head to salemlitfest.org and click donate. And you can also find the rest of today's lineup there. Again, thank you all so much. It was really wonderful to have you.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us.
Thanks for your great answers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.